I can still feel the sting of that night, snow biting into my skin, headlights fading into the darkness, and the taste of betrayal so raw it burned my throat. He thought he was driving away with his freedom, but he didn't know he was leaving everything behind. The woman who built his world, the loyalty that could have saved him, and the part of himself that once loved me. My name is Ava, and this is the night my life ended, only to begin again. The evening had started in shimmering gold. The company's annual gala was always his favorite night of the year. I had spent hours curling my hair, smoothing the satin dress he insisted on buying. Image matters, he used to say. Our photos together from previous galas looked like perfection. His arm around my waist, my smile polished but soft, the background glittering with corporate logos. This year felt different from the moment we arrived. His touch was a fraction colder, his jokes a little too forced. People came up to congratulate him on landing a huge contract. I smiled dutifully, but every time I looked across the room, his eyes were somewhere else, no, on someone else. Madeline, younger, bolder, always leaning just a little too close when they talked at the office. I had pretended not to notice for months, telling myself it was harmless admiration. But tonight the truth hung in the air like perfume. I tried to shake it off, sipping sparkling water while others drank champagne. The band played an upbeat number, and he clapped Madeline on the back like she was his partner in crime. She wore a crimson dress that made her look like a flame among ice sculptures. When she glanced at me across the room, there was no apology in her eyes. Only certainty, as if she already knew how the night would end. My stomach twisted. I reminded myself we had been trying for a baby, that we had built a home together, that this couldn't just dissolve like a mirage. I even rehearsed what I'd say on the drive back, words about therapy, about working things out. But deep down, something already felt broken. By the time we left, the snow had thickened into heavy flakes swirling under the street lamps. The roads were slick and quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every unspoken word inside a car. He drove with both hands tight on the wheel. The smell of his cologne mixed with winter air leaking through a vent. I started with small talk, how beautiful the decorations were, how good the dessert tasted. He didn't answer. Finally, I asked, is something wrong? He exhaled sharply, like a man bracing for a blow, and then said I can't do this anymore. At first I thought he meant the late nights or the stress. Do what? I asked. His knuckles whitened. Us. This, marriage. The word hit me harder than any snowball. He stared ahead. I'm tired of pretending. I'm in love with Madeline. I've been seeing her for months. My ears roared. I gripped my dress, feeling the sequins dig into my palm. You're joking, I whispered. He shook his head, eyes fixed on the icy road. It's over, Ava. It's been over for a long time. Memories flickered. Our wedding day under a summer sky, the nights we painted our first apartment, the secret smiles over morning coffee. All of it now framed as a lie. You promised me a family, I said. My voice cracked. You promised me forever. He shrugged once, a jerky, guilty motion. I'm sorry. Madeline makes me feel alive. I'm dropping you off, then taking her home. We'll talk later. The casual cruelty in his tone stunned me. We passed a dark stretch of highway lined with snowdrifts. He slowed and pulled over near an empty service road. Get out, he said. I stared at him, thinking I'd misheard. Get out. Yes, he snapped, not meeting my eyes. I need space. I'll come back after I take her home. He said it like he was leaving a parcel at a depot. My dignity flared. I opened the door because the alternative, begging, felt worse. Cold air knifed into the car. I stepped onto the shoulder, my heels sinking in slush. The door slammed. Without another glance, he drove off. The red taillights dwindled, swallowed by snow and distance. For a few seconds I just stood there, arms wrapped around myself, watching my breath plume into the night. Surely he'd circle back. Surely this was a tantrum. But the road stayed empty. The silence became a weight pressing on my chest. I fumbled for my phone. 3% battery. No charger. No signal bars flickered. The nearest town was miles away. Panic whispered in my ear. I kicked off my heels, clutching them like weapons, and started walking. The snow clung to my hair, melted down my neck, refroze on my skin. Each step sank deep, dragging me back. My dress tangled around my knees. My hands went numb first, then my feet. Thoughts became fragmented flashes. My mother's voice saying I was too soft for this world, the miscarriage we never really mourned together, his eyes across the gala floor. My tears froze on my cheeks. I tried screaming his name into the white void, but the wind stole my voice. Time lost meaning. My phone died. I stumbled and fell to my knees, catching myself with bare hands in the snow. Needles of pain shot up my arms. I wanted to sleep right there, to curl up and let the storm erase me. Somewhere in the haze, a sentence formed, "No one is coming. Not him, not anyone. If you stop now, it's over." The thought wasn't dramatic, it was factual, like a weather report. Something primal snapped awake inside me. I crawled upright, forcing my legs to move. I picked a dim glow on the horizon, a window, a street lamp, and fixed my eyes on it. I staggered forward, whispering a mantra with each step, "Move. Breathe, move, breathe." My body felt like a stranger's, heavy and slow, but the spark in my chest grew. The glow became clearer, a farmhouse porch light, warm and steady against the storm. I tried to hurry, but my knees buckled. I fell again, tasting blood from a bitten lip. "Just a little more," I muttered, crawling now. The last few feet blurred. Wooden steps under my palms. A door, then everything tilted and went black. When I opened my eyes, I was wrapped in quilts smelling of cedar and something savory. A wood stove crackled nearby. My feet were propped on a stool, bandaged. For a moment I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then a woman's voice, soft but firm, "You're awake." I turned my head. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes sat beside me holding a mug. "I'm Mrs. Harper," she said. "You collapsed on my porch." Lucky I heard the noise. She held the mug out. Soup. Slow sips. I tried to sit up but dizziness swamped me. "My husband," I croaked. She shook her head gently. "We'll call someone later. Right now you need warmth." The soup was salty and rich. As I drank, my story spilled out. Snatches of the gala, the roadside, the betrayal. I didn't even know why I told her everything, but she listened without interrupting, only reaching out once to squeeze my hand. When I finished, trembling, she said, "You survived. That means you get to decide what comes next." Her words sank into me deeper than any cliché. Decide what comes next. Not endure. Not wait. Decide. She let me sleep again under layers of quilts while the storm raged outside. In the morning, sunlight poured through lace curtains, revealing a cozy kitchen lined with mason jars. Mrs. Harper had already called a doctor friend who checked me for frostbite, only mild damage, treatable. She offered to drive me to town once the roads cleared. I thanked her, but shame pressed at me. I had nowhere to go. My marriage was a coffin, and I'd just stepped out of it barefoot. Yet under that shame, a tiny spark flickered. For years I'd kept a quiet side income from freelance design work he mocked as a hobby. I'd saved every extra penny. Not much, but enough to get me started. Enough to disappear. Enough to become someone new. The thought didn't feel like revenge. It felt like oxygen. Mrs. Harper's kitchen smelled of coffee and possibility. Outside, the snow was already melting under a pale sun. For the first time since the door slammed, I felt the shape of a different future pressing against the edges of my grief. I sat at her wooden table, fingers curled around a chipped mug, and let the idea take root. I could leave, not just the farmhouse, but the city, the life built around him. I could choose where to go, what to be, who to become. The storm had stripped me of everything except one thing, the power to decide. And in that quiet kitchen, wrapped in borrowed clothes, I realized that power was more than enough. 6 months later the world felt like a different planet. The farmhouse, the storm, the night on the roadside, all of it had started to feel like an old photograph, a picture of a girl I no longer recognized. In the tiny coastal city I had moved to, the salt air smelled nothing like the cold metallic scent of snow. Each morning the sun came up over the Atlantic like a slow-burning ember, and I would stand at the window of my studio apartment above the bakery, coffee in hand, telling myself out loud, "You're here. You made it." It was a ritual as important as breathing. I had come here with one suitcase and the quiet savings from my freelance design work. At first, the studio looked bare, white walls, a second-hand mattress, one chipped table, but it felt like freedom. No framed wedding photos, no trace of his cologne. Just blank space for me to fill. I spent the first weeks walking everywhere, learning the streets, memorizing the names of strangers at the farmer's market, breathing in the scent of bread rising downstairs. When loneliness crept up at night, I'd wrap myself in a blanket and draw for hours until my fingers cramped. The work had always been my refuge, now it became my lifeline. I built a new website under a simple brand name, no hint of my married identity. The first commissions were small. Logos for coffee carts, wedding invitations, a yoga studio's rebrand. But with each completed job, a new stripe of confidence appeared. I began answering emails in a tone that felt like a woman who belonged in her own life. One evening, when a client wrote, "You're so talented, thank you," I cried into my tea. Not because of the compliment, but because it was the first time in years that praise felt real and not transactional. Money was tight. I lived on noodles and apples, sometimes skipping meals to buy a new set of design brushes. But the hunger felt different from the ache of being unwanted. It was a hunger of building. I joined a local co-working space to escape my apartment. The first time I walked in, a woman with blue-streaked hair smiled at me and said, "First day." I nodded. She introduced herself as Lila, a freelance copywriter. Over time we started sharing lunches, swapping stories. She never asked for my past, she just accepted my present. Friendship like that felt like fresh air. Therapy helped too. I found a gentle-voiced therapist named Grace who specialized in trauma and life transitions. In her office above a bookstore, she invited me to tell the whole snowstorm story from start to finish, then again in smaller pieces, until the panic stopped clenching my chest. She helped me name the abuse I had normalized, gaslighting, silent treatments, the subtle erosion of self. "He left you in the snow long before that night," she said softly once. That night was just the literal version. I wrote that line down in my journal and stared at it until it became a kind of mantra. As spring turned to early summer, the business began to bloom. One of my designs, a whimsical illustration for a local surf shop, was reposted by a popular influencer. Orders poured in. My inbox exploded. For the first time I had to make a waiting list. The money still wasn't lavish, but it was enough to pay rent without dipping into savings. I upgraded my mattress, bought a plant, then another. My studio filled with sketches taped to the walls, sunlight on hardwood, and the smell of ocean drifting through the cracked window. The space became a nest, not a cave. Meanwhile, whispers about him drifted through mutual acquaintances on social media. I never searched his name, but the internet has a way of delivering information you don't ask for. He had lost the promotion. Madeline had left him publicly. There were rumors of layoffs at the company. Once, an unknown number flashed on my phone. My heart kicked like an animal. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. 2 days later, another unknown number. Again I let it ring out. Each time, the temptation to pick up rose like a tide. What if he was sorry? What if he begged? But under the temptation was something else, steadier, a refusal. Answering would be stepping back into the snow. One rainy morning I opened my email to find an invitation. A national women's entrepreneurship panel had seen my work online. My story of starting over had been mentioned in a blog post, and they wanted me to speak. My first reaction was to close the laptop. Me, speak, in front of hundreds. But then I remembered the girl on the roadside whispering, "Move. Breathe." Saying yes felt like another step forward. I wrote back, I'd be honored. The weeks leading up to the event were a blur of preparation. Lila helped me draft my talk. Grace taught me grounding exercises for stage fright. I bought a simple navy dress from a thrift shop, nothing flashy, just something that made me feel steady. The night before the conference, I sat by my window listening to the waves and wrote my opening lines longhand. 6 months ago I was left in a snowstorm. Today I stand here by choice. The morning of the panel I traveled by train to the city. In the green room backstage, other women chatted nervously, adjusting microphones. I could hear the murmur of the audience on the other side of the curtain. My hands trembled, but it wasn't the tremble of fear, it was the tremble of becoming. When they called my name, I walked out into the light. Faces blurred into a soft glow beyond the stage. I told my story slowly. How I had been left on a snowy road by the man I thought was my forever, how a stranger's kindness saved my life, how I rebuilt piece by piece. I didn't name him. I didn't mention revenge. I spoke instead about reclaiming self-worth, about turning survival into agency, about small steps like drawing at night and saying no to unknown numbers. I watched the audience lean forward, eyes shining. By the time I reached the final line, Being left in the snow was not the end of my life, it was the end of living someone else's. The room was silent in that electric way that means people are feeling something. Then applause swelled like a wave. Afterward, as people filed out, a young woman approached me. Her mascara had smudged into faint shadows under her eyes. "My fiancé just left me," she whispered. "I didn't think I could go on. But hearing you," she didn't finish. She didn't need to. I took her hands and squeezed them. "You will," I said quietly. "One step at a time. Move. Breathe." She smiled through tears. In her face I saw the version of myself who had crawled toward a porch light, and for a moment the circle closed. That evening, back in my apartment, I set the conference badge on my desk and stared at it. Outside, the ocean wind rattled the window. For the first time in months, I thought of him without feeling the stab of humiliation. Instead, I felt gratitude, not for his betrayal, but for the way it had forced me to find myself. If he had not left me in the snow, I might still be living as a shadow in my own life. Later that week another unknown number rang. I let it go to voicemail. This time he left a message. His voice was strained, almost broken. He said he'd made mistakes, that he missed me, that he wanted to talk. I listened once, then deleted it. Not with anger, but with calm. The Ava he'd left on the roadside no longer existed. The woman in this apartment, running her own business, speaking on stages, making new friends, was not waiting to be chosen. She had already chosen herself. In August, Mrs. Harper sent me a postcard. She had found my new address through the return label on a thank you gift I'd mailed her. It showed a painting of a lighthouse. Inside she'd written, "You survived. You're shining now." I pinned it above my desk where I could see it each morning before work. Some days when deadlines piled up and doubt whispered in my ear, I'd touch the postcard and remember her warm kitchen, the soup, the quilts, the first moment of safety after the storm. By autumn my business had grown enough to hire a part-time assistant. Lila introduced me to her cousin, a college student who needed flexible work. We turned the studio into a buzzing little operation. Orders shipped out in neat packages with handwritten thank you notes. Clients began requesting me for workshops. I started saving for a bigger place, maybe even a small gallery space to host local artists. The life taking shape around me was not the life I had planned as a wife in a big house with him, but it was mine in every brushstroke. One crisp evening I walked to the beach alone. The tide was low, the sky streaked with pink and silver. I kicked off my shoes and let the cold water lap at my ankles. Closing my eyes, I whispered the story one more time, like casting off a spell. I was left in the snow. I survived. I chose. The wind carried the words out to sea. When I opened my eyes, I felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had finally slipped off my shoulders. People often ask for a neat ending. Did he ever apologize? Did we ever meet again? Did I find new love? The truth is, the story's power isn't in him at all. It's in the moment I stopped waiting for him to come back and started walking toward the light, even if it meant crawling through snow. That's the message I carry now when I speak, when I draw, when I sit across from someone just beginning their own rebuilding. Survival is not the end. It's the beginning. Standing there on the beach, watching the horizon darken, I realized the full hook of my story. It was never about revenge or tragedy. It was about claiming authorship. The man who left me thought he'd ended something. He'd ended the version of me who believed my worth was tied to him. The woman who rose from that roadside learned that everything you lose to betrayal can become a seed for freedom if you choose to plant it. And so, to anyone listening now, to anyone standing on their own lonely roadside, the snow will stop. You will move. You will breathe. And one day, you'll tell your story not as a victim but as the author of a life you chose. That is the strongest, most inspiring message I can leave with you.